Good evening, classmates in ASCI 609. I'm Mark DeLordo. For this presentation this week, I chose to discuss the requirements for the certification of maintenance personnel. Okay, and to outline today's presentation, I'll first pose a question statement about the certification process. Then I'll be discussing meeting each requirement, and finally finish with what to expect in the testing process, and then a conclusion and references. To begin with, I'd like to start with a question. How does one become a certified FA airframe and power plant mechanic, an A&P, or otherwise known as an aircraft maintenance technician, an AMT? The answer is simply by following through requirements under FAR Part 65, Certification of Airmen Other than Flight Crew Members. The first requirement is that an individual must be 18 years old and able to speak, read, and understand the English language. There are additional requirements for non-U.S. citizens. The second requirement is you must attain the required amount of practical experience. And finally, there's 3 types of tests that an applicant must pass. Because the first step is only an age and language requirement, I'll begin with discussing the second requirement. There are multiple paths to gain the required experience. One can begin work as an aircraft repairman without a certification while under the supervision of a qualified AMT to meet the on-the-job training requirement as a civilian. Or one can attain the experience level in the military as well. Additionally, an applicant can attend an FAA-approved aircraft maintenance technician school. The on-the-job experience requires 18 months of working on airframes or power plant systems individually, or 30 months training working on both systems concurrently. The third and final requirement for an A&P certification is that all applicants must pass 3 knowledge tests and 2 sets of associated oral and practical tests. The first test is a general knowledge test. Then they can go on to take the airframe knowledge test and its associated O&P, or they can take the power plant and knowledge test and associated O&P. It doesn't really matter because one can complete only one type of certification until the other is passed. Upon completion of all 3 requirements, they get the privilege of the AMT certification grants the holder of a mechanic certificate the authorization to approve an aircraft, airframe, aircraft engine, a propeller, appliance, or component part for return to service as provided in FAR Part 65, which then grants the part or the aircraft its airworthiness, which is the goal of aircraft maintenance. Finally, we're going to discuss some things to expect in the certification process. And then general knowledge exam, we'll start with some of the basics, aircraft system operations, some aviation history and airline and aviation regulations. The airframe test is going to cover structures and sheet metal types, hardware, hydraulics, flight control systems, landing gear and components. The power plant test is going to include reciprocating and turbine engines, as well as engine instruments, propellers, and auxiliary power units. The oral and practical tests can be rigorous examinations lasting 8 hours and certainly comparable to check rides. And additionally, I've heard of some surprises in these tests that it covers content on rather old aircraft systems and engines, and even canvas aircraft structures. Okay, in conclusion, the 3 requirements for gaining an AMT certification under FAR Part 65. Requirement 1 is an age and language requirement. Step 2 is acquiring a certain level of education or experience. And requirement 3 is passing the 3 types of tests. There are some references that we used in this presentation, and thank you very much.